Well, for a deeper analysis, let's bring in Ovigwe Ogwegu, a policy analyst at Development Reimagined. Ovigwe, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. And he is joining us via Zoom from Toronto. Ovigwe, the news the last few days is that the U.S. tariffs impact has shaken stock markets from the U.S. to Asia and even to some African countries. What effects are you seeing on the stock markets in Africa? And can you try to make an ordinary non-economist understand why markets are reacting this way?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So as we know, the stock markets of major economies around the world and in Africa, of course, suffered a rout following Trump's tariff. If you look at South Africa, Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the all share index actually went down 4.5% following the announcement of the tariffs. And then that's actually the biggest dip since the 2020 COVID pandemic. So that's very significant. But if you fast forward to as it is now, we see markets are still struggling, and there's no chance of recovery anytime soon. Egypt's EGX 100, plunged 4.5% by Sunday. So it's really a major challenge for the major economies on the continent. But what does this really mean? I think for every person who is looking at this stock market, I think we can, of course, expect a reduction in investment, reduction in overall confidence in the economy, perhaps slower economic growth for many countries that are dependent on international trade, not just even exporting to the U.S. because overall investment confidence, is down across the world.
All right, Ovigwe, now away from the stock market now, how worried should African countries be, and what are some of the most immediate effects we can expect to see in Africa if things stay as they stand right now?
I think one of the major signs and sentiment that is growing across the continent as of yet now is that people are talking more about boosting intra-African trade. Right, as we know, the AfCFTA was already technically in operation prior to Trump's tariff for many years, for a few years now, I should say. And that now at this point, there is this belief that countries can actually offset some of the market share that they'll be losing by trading more within the continent. That could work for some countries. I think that's something that can be done. And I mean, the total value of African export to the U.S. in 2024 was about 39.5 billion. It seems like a small amount, but for some countries, the U.S. is a major market. Countries like Lesotho, 26% of its total export goes to the U.S. So that's significant.
All right, Ovigwe, let's talk solution here. Apart from talks with the U.S. president, how else can Africa address the situation of U.S. tariffs, and what's the alternative way out?
Well, immediately, it seems some countries don't want to respond to tariffs, and in many cases, rightfully so, because that will just make themselves even in a bad spot. I think for countries that want to engage with the U.S. to try in this approach of transactionalism that is very popular in the Trump administration, that could work. But overall, not just looking at transactionalism, but also trading within themselves is very important, looking for alternative markets. The U.S. may be the biggest economy in the world, but it is not the only economy in the world. You have very near-peer economies like China, for instance, even the European Union. So African countries can indeed not just look within the continent, but also look to elsewhere, countries that are still committed to globalization as the status quo, and also see how they can boost trade with these countries and regions as well.